So today's broadcast is sponsored by Mechi Wurzberger and his family for three things. A is Tzai Budala. Yesterday was the baby and yahrzeit of Mechi's brother Yosef Arya, Alav Shalom, Ben Yibod Alachayim Toivim, Eliezer Aaron Halevi, and to celebrate the recent engagement of his son Shmuli to Chanina Judas, and to be Mekayim the tzedakah portion of the Tshuva Tfilut Tzedakah Marvinus Vereg there. I love that. I don't know, just
What about the tshuva and tefillah part?
well, that he can't fulfill by sponsoring the broadcast. He took care of that. He took care of that. You know what I like it? I like because he's thinking about it. He's actually thinking about it. To me, it's just a slogan that we say before bum bum badum, but to him it's very real. Okay, Zok the Hedel Gemara weiter. So we had an interesting story where Rabbi Nehemiah was vertracht in learning, and he walked out of the Tchum, and Rabbi Chisda went to his Rabbi Rab Nachman and asked what to do. So Rab Nachman told him to make a human wall around him to protect him. And then there was this question in the Besmedrash. In the Besmedrash, everything had a hierarchy. So Rab Nachman Bar Yaakov, he was the Rebbe. Sitting in front of him was Rava, and sitting behind Rava was Rab Nachman Bar Yitzchak. And Rab Nachman Bar Yitzchak wanted to know from Rava what exactly was the chiddush that Rab Nachman said with the fact that he said to make a wall, a corridor with two walls or three walls out of people to bring Rab Nehemiah back into the Tchum. And the Gemara came out that the chiddush was not Rab Gamliel's halacha that you could do this wall. Rather, the chiddush is Rabbi Yosy's halacha that the wall ended 2 amas before the Tchum, so there are still 2 amas short, and we're passing like a Eliezer who holds that whenever you have a space, you have 2 amas, you have a 2 amma radius around you, so that will allow him to traverse the gap, and that was the lashon of Yichanes. He can go in even after the wall's there. He still needs to be able to traverse that 2 amma gap. So Eisei Rab Nachman Bar Yitzchak l'Rava. So Rab Nachman Bar Yitzchak, who's in the back row behind Rava, asked Rava Kasha about this interpretation. And the Brisa says as follows: Nofel doifna. If one of the walls of someone's sukkah fell in, and doifna, the Gemara is going to tell us later, indicates that this was an integral wall of a sukkah, meaning it's not a fourth wall. A fourth wall is similar to a third wheel. You don't need it, right? So doifna seems to indicate it was an integral wall. It depends on how many walls there are there. If there's only 3 walls and the one wall falls, then the third wall fell, right? So then lo yamid bo adam, you shouldn't tell a person to stand there. I still remember when I was in Camp Aguda, there was a very funny comedy skit that was made, and they needed somebody to stand somewhere, I guess, like to act as a wall for a sukkah. So someone screamed at him, "Don't just do something, stand there," right? Because they needed there. So nofel doifna lo yamid bo adam. You shouldn't have someone stand there, or behema v'kalim, v'lo yiska v'samita, and you should not stand up a bed so they can use the bed as sort of a frame, lifrei saleh asadin, to spread a shmata over it that would make a wall. You're not allowed to make an oil arai. You're not allowed to set up a new oil, even though it's a temporary oil. One minute do that on Yom Tov. And surely one may not do that on Shabbos. So the question that Rab Nachman was posing is, how could you set up humans to form a wall? You see that you're not allowed to set up humans to form a wall, because there by the sukkah you weren't allowed to do it. So why are you allowed to do it to create barriers, to create a corridor for Nehemiah to return into the Tchum? Amalei, no. So Rabbi told Rab Nachman Yitzchak, at amrit li mecha. You ask me a kasha on what happened here from that brisa, and I'll be able to show you support from a different brisa. What does the other brisa say? A person is allowed to make his friend into a wall. She should be able to eat, drink, and sleep in the sukkah. So that definitely seems to indicate that, again, this is going to be a third wall, not a fourth wall, because it's the difference between being able to eat and drink and not is the difference between whether or not it's a kosher or sukkah. But Yiskov is a mita, but Yifis Olasadin, and he's also allowed to stand up a bed and put a shmata over it, kidei shaloi tipoil chama alames, so it can act as a shade, as a partition to shade as a mace standing there, and it's in the sun and it'll deteriorate. So to protect the mace, they're allowed to make this temporary partition. And there's food there, and again, the food in the sun is going to rot, so you want to protect it by building a shade wall. So, frankly, more caution adadi. You might have a very good raya from this brisa that you're allowed to make a human wall, but at the end of the day, we do have a steer in brises. How could we explain the difference between these two brises? Zoktimar lokasha, harabalazar harabanan. It'll be totally in the machlokes of Eliezer Rabbanan that we had back in Shabbos. In the second Shabbos, we had a Mishnah. Titnan, pakakach haloin. If there is a window that's open, Rashi learned this was a skylight at the time, and Tosfos learned it was just a window in the wall, and you have a big piece of plywood that you want to use as a window shade to close the wall. So Rabbi Eliezer is very strict. He says you're not allowed to just put a piece of plywood to close a wall because you're adding to the wall with a temporary structure by adding this wood there. But so Rabbi Eliezer is mancha kosher vitali. If this piece of wood that you want to use to cover the window hole is chained to the wall and hanging off the wall, it's not even resting on the floor, so it's a short chain. So it's very clear that this is part of the wall. It's just acting like as a window shade to open and close. Then and it's not considered adding to an oil. But vimlav, if this board is loose and it's not connected to the wall, or even if it's connected to the wall but it's resting on the ground, ain't boy. You're not allowed to close up the window with it because we look at that as being moisef al oil, which is falls under the category of binyan, of building on Shabbos. You're allowed to add, even if it's not part of the wall, it's not connected to the wall. There's already a wall here. You're just being moisef on the wall by covering over a window hole. That's never a problem. So you see, there's a machlokes between whether or not you're allowed to be moisef on the oil. So maybe that's what the machlokes between these two brises are. The brise that held, I make a human wall, holds that like a Eliezer, that you're not allowed to add to a wall. You're not allowed to add to a binyan. Masha'inkein, the brise that allows you to make a wall with humans, holds like the chachamim that you're allowed to add. And we're holding, in other words, Rab Nachman, who suggested that we create this human wall to allow Rab Nechemia to enter the tchum, will hold that you're allowed to be moisef al binyan. Fake the Gemara, but that cannot be, because we're not discussing being moisef on a binyan. By adding, by covering a window hole, you're adding to an already existing structure. Here, you want to build a wall from scratch. But Itmar Allah, Amar Rabbi Barbachan, Amar B'Yechanan, Hakoil Moedim, both Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim are Moeda, She'ein Oisin Oil Arai B'Tchilu B'Yom Tov, Ve'in Tzorech Lomer B'Shabbos. Loi Nechleku, the whole Machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and their Rabbanan is El Lahoisef. There's already a wall, and there's a window hole in the wall. You want to close it, but the wall's there already. There, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Ein Meisifin B'Yom Tov, Ve'in Tzorech Lomer B'Shabbos, V'Chachamim Omer Meisifin B'Shabbos, Ve'in Tzorech Lomer B'Yom Tov. But to make a full wall, everybody would agree you're not allowed to. So now we still don't understand the chiluk in these two brises. Why in one case we are allowed to use humans for the wall, and in one case you weren't. A. And B is, how could you do it? How did Reb Nachman allow it to be done there? They were making a new wall on Shabbos, and that's sure not allowed. I mean, when we learned the Gemara in Shabbos, the Gemara didn't clarify that if it's clearly part of the window and it's a window, the Gemara seems to assume no matter what. No, because it's actually made for it, because Rabbi Eliezer holds even if this piece of wood is actually chained to the wall, which means there's a hole that was finished, made properly, and it's designed. But if it's not hanging, it's actually just resting on the floor because it's a long chain. Even that would be also. So that must be. Why would you chain a wood to a wall unless there was actually a hole cut out? There wasn't just a breach.
No, so that's what I'm saying. So yes, but would you hold that even if there's a window pane that you're also adding to this wall?
Yeah, Rabbi Eliezer would. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So Zok to Gemara, Ella loy kasha will have a whole new interpretation as to whether or not you're allowed to replace this wall with a behemoth or a kalim or with humans. And let's try a whole new machlokes. Hakrab Meir, Hakrab Yehuda. We're going down a level. We're going to look at the actual validity of this wall. The Tanya also lebehema doifin sukkah. What if you used an elephant or a cow as one wall of your sukkah? Reb Meir holds it's possible, and Rashi says it's possible because Shema Tivrach. It's not really a permanent wall. The behema can just walk away. Rabbi Yehuda machshir, but Rabbi Yehuda allows it. So let's suggest as follows: Reb Meir the apostle hasam. Reb Meir holds it's not a good sukkah if you use an animal. Almaloi mechitzahi. So it's not a mechitza. So therefore hachashari. Here it would be mutter. So the brisa that says it's mutter to set up a behemoth to do that would be going according to Reb Meir, because since it's not a good wall, therefore you're allowed to do it. Hakashari, the lav midi of it. He's not really making a wall because it doesn't work. I'm sorry. So you ask me, how can he sleep in the sukkah? That's exactly what the Gemara is going. Well, people is different. People won't run away. Behemoths will run away. If you tell a person to don't just do something, stand there, he might stand there for a little bit, for a little while, for a little while. What? Well, if you tell him to wear a mask, he might walk away. But I'll call upon him. If it's the Gemara is going to ask in a second, what do you mean? What do you mean it doesn't work? He's using it for the sukkah. But at this point, the Gemara wants to suggest that since Reb Meir holds anyway an animal is not a good wall, therefore you're allowed to do it on Shabbos because you're not really doing anything. Rabbi Yehuda Kamachshir Asam and Rabbi Yehuda who holds that making a wall of a sukkah with a behemoth works. Alma mechitza. So you see, it's an effective mechitza that you're building with this wall. Therefore, hacha asar. Here it would be asar. Frank the Gemara. So Rashi says right away. The Gemara could have asked. Doesn't make sense. How could you say that the brisa that says that it's mutter to do is going according to Reb Meir? The brisa says you're actually using it. If you look at the lashon brisa that says you're allowed to do it, so clearly we're using this to sleep in the sukkah, which is the first brisa says clearly you're doing it to make the sukkah kosher. So how can you suggest that the reason why it's mutter or usher is because it's effective or not? But the Gemara has another kasha that also is effective in slugging this up. Zok the Gemara, B'tizbara, Eimer de Shamash Leila Reb Meir. Where did Reb Meir say that it's not a good wall? That's only a behemoth. But Adam v'Kalim, Adam, which Duvi says will wander away, but the Gemara is suggesting a person who's a little bit more reliable, or Kalim. Kalim for sure aren't going to walk away unless they're expensive tools. But Kalim will not walk away if you pile them up. Mishamashlei, there for sure, Reb Meir would agree that they would be a good wall. So Oibazoi, how is it allowed here? The Su Reb Meir aliba deman. Reb Meir holds either like Reb Eliezer or like Rabban. So aliba de Reb Eliezer, if he holds like Reb Eliezer, the house of Nami Aser, it would be Aser even to add onto an oil. Ella, you're going to have to. So how can you suggest that Reb Meir holds it would be mutter since it doesn't have an impact? Rabbi Eliezer holds even if it doesn't have an impact, it's still usher because the wall is there already. You're just closing a window, which has absolutely no halachic value. Nevertheless, Rabbi Eliezer holds it's usher. So we can't use Reb Meir to say that you're allowed to make a wall without any halachic value. Ella liba derban. So you have to say Reb Meir, according to the sheet of the Rabbanon, who holds that you're allowed to add onto an oil, that's why it would be allowed here. But again, Eimer the Amir Rabbanon lahaisif. The Rabbanon are only suggesting that you're allowed to add to it already an existing oil. So it's an existing wall, you're allowed to add to it. But our Gemara, our brisa here, we're talking about filling in a complete wall. We're talking about a wall that fell down. So you're actually building a wall. There you don't have any makar whatsoever to suggest that would be mutter. Ella. Let's try a whole new take on explaining why one brisa allows it and one doesn't. So you want to say maybe adding a whole wall would be similar to being moisif on the binyan. I hear your art. The Gemara doesn't hold like that, but it's a very good art because the Gemara is saying you look at each wall by itself. You're saying each wall by itself should have zero significance other than the fact that it's part of a larger structure. So really, the shaila is, am I adding to an existing structure or not? Why look at a wall? That's a very good aura, and I don't know the answer to that. Because a wall has zero value. 3 walls has a value. 1 wall by itself has no value. That's it. No, exactly, this kind of. The kelim akelim loy kasha. It's not schwer why in one brisa it allows you to build a wall with kelim using this bed, and in the other case it doesn't, because habedoif and shlishis, habedoif and revius. When you talk about the third wall, that's what makes it into an oil. That's where would be also, because you're making the oil by making the third wall, and the brisa that says you're allowed to put up a partition is bedoif and revius, where it's just for convenience, but it's not a halachic wall anyway. Dekanami. And I'll prove it to you, because in the brisa that says you're not allowed to put up a wall, the katani nafal doifna, its wall fell down. It doesn't just say a doifin fell down, its wall, which indicates it's a wall with more significance, shmamina. So if we look at the 2 original brises, which is where this all started from, let's just quickly run through it and see how it works out. So the first brisa is what we started with today, is nafal doifna. If one of its 3 walls fell, which means it now lost its status of an oil, lo yamid ba'adam behema v'kelim v'lo yiska v'samita liver salasadin l'fashia enoishan oil ara betchila b'yomtiv. By making this third wall, you're making a wall with significance, with halachic significance, that's creating a sukkah, and therefore would not be allowed. The next brisa was oisa adam es chaveret doifen k'dei sheyoicham v'yishte v'yosham v'yiska v'samita v'yiv salasadin. There where it says it's mutter, it's speaking about the 4th wall. So it's not such an important wall. But the Gemara is going to ask in a second, but what do you mean? It says how can you say that's the 4th wall? So we're going to run into a problem shortly. Shmamina, Elo affect the Gemara. Adam is still schwer. Because Rashi says, you can say that it's the 4th wall, because it's more than that. When the second brisa says you're allowed to set up a wall, if you noticed, the brisa threw in a new case to protect, to shade a mace and food from rotting in the sun. So you see clearly it wasn't made to be for the mitzvah sukkah. But the case of Adam, the brisa clearly says you're having an Adam stand there so that you can eat, drink, or sleep in the sukkah. That has a halachic impact. So how can you say that, teretz? The Gemara loy kasha kan ledas kan shaloi midas. Midas, if you tell a person stand there because they need you to be there for a wall, so the person has to be there, then he's actually becoming a wall, and that's when it's going to be osir. But the brisa says it's mutu shaloi ladas. I mean, a guy standing there, he doesn't even know that you're using him as a wall. You're exploiting him, and he doesn't even know about it. So Rashi is there. It's mutter. Mutter the mishamasiyas oil lekala meimar. He can't answer al tasiyas oil. Dein derech binyan bekach. Normally, you don't build things because people happen to be standing there, and therefore they're in oil. That's not the normal way to build things. Avol kli derech binyan bekach. If you put a keli somewhere, that's a permanent thing. That will be a binyan. So the second brisa that says that you're allowed to make a wall with a person is speaking if the person's standing there and he doesn't realize that he's being part of the wall. You're still allowed to use him as your wall and just try to get him not to move. In fact, the Gemara, didn't Reb Nachman suggest that they should take a whole bunch of people and line them up to make a corridor so that Reb Nechemia could come back into the tchum? That's ladas. You're making a wall of das. How could you allow that to occur? That's not what happened. There was a whole bunch of people standing around, not even realizing that they were creating a partition. And Reb Nachman was just suggesting, look, those people are there, take advantage of them and quickly let them come in. In fact, the Gemara, but Reb Chisda was the one who went to ask the Shaila by Reb Nachman. Reb Nachman told him to orchestrate this thing. So Reb Chisda definitely knew about it. So how could it be allowed? So that's why Reb Chisda Reb Chisda was the manager. He was just the manager. Everybody else did the work. So Mamela, he got out of it. No, Rashi says those people must have had reason to be there. For them, they were in the tchum. Otherwise, how could you get to? How could they go there? They went there because they happened to have made an Eruv. They had business out there, and because of that, we live there. So whatever the case is, they had reason to be there, and for some reason they were standing in rows. I'm not sure why they were standing in rows, but they didn't realize that they were being treated as a wall. So we're going to soon see another case of how you can show how a Rebbe can arrange for himself a wall very easily. You know, every time a Rebbe walks into a shul, there's Kriya Shamsif, right? So right there, he's making himself 2 walls. And we're going to see actually an exact case like that right now. Hanu b'nei Genana. It's a wall. It's not the top portion, but it's a wall. It's contributing to building a structure. A structure has to have walls. Yes, even the walls. Yeah, sure. We were discussing the walls of a sukkah, right? The wall of a sukkah is an integral part of the kashrus of the sukkah because a sukkah has to have 3 walls. But you're actually bringing up a very important point because this machlokes between the Eliezer and the Chachamim, if you're allowed to add this window shade to the wall, there's a big machlokes between Rashi and Tosfos there in Shabbos, which also leaks out over here. Rashi learns it's only a skylight. There's never a problem with adding to a wall. There's only a problem if it's an oil, which is exactly what you're saying. Tosfos brings a raya from this Gemara that it's a wall as well. But Rashi actually learns we're discussing closing up a hole in the sky, and there's never in the ceiling. There's never an issue of adding to a wall for an oil. So your point is very well taken. Rashi holds like it. It's not the point. The Rashi says it. It's Rashi neither. No, that's why you have to leave it open a little bit. I think. Yeah. Yeah, but it's when you're closing it, you're being moisef. You're all being moisef. So we must hold you allowed to be moisef. Else there's an oil there already. Yeah. Okay, that's only a problem for rains. Zok to Gemara. Like this year, there's no way Hashem's going to make a rain sukkah. I mean, after what we've been through, at least our tension will go. Zok to Gemara. Well, might snow. Hanu b'nei Genana. These b'nei Genana, the b'nei Genana were people. I think their profession was they made wedding parties. We had it before. They needed hadassim. So Hanu b'nei Genana, the ilu maya b'mechitza shel b'nei adam. They had to bring. They needed water in, and it was. They couldn't carry the water. There was no eruv, so they set up a mechitza of humans, and they used it to bring the water in. Negdinu Shmuel. Shmuel. I'm not sure if that means he gave him malchus. He flogged him. He gave him malchus for doing it. Amar, he said, "Im amru shaloi midas." If there happens to be a crowd standing around that you can use as walls, and there we allow you to use that as walls. Yoimur Ladas, I didn't say you can go set people up. Forget you're making an oil, you're not allowed to do that. So he didn't flog them for carrying. They didn't carry. The avil was that he made the wall. Probably the Genana, the organizers, like just like Doug Ford, the organizers of the party gets a $10,000 fine. But if you participate in the party, you'll have to pay $750. So it could be, it's mashma that it was the mashma that was the b'nei Genana that he fined. You're saying he'd be fined the people who participated in the wall.
They were the ones who did the
I hear.
They were the ones who did
Who actually did it. They actually did it. I hear. So you tell me he wasn't punishing them. He gave them malchus because they were over, not because they were troublemakers, but they were actually over. And this year they built an oil on Shabbos. I hear. Okay, very good. That makes sense. Zok Hanuziki, there were these jugs of water, jugs of whatever that belonged to Rava. They were in the shuk of a mechuzah, meaning they were in a Rosh Hashanah or Carmelis, and you couldn't access them. So what happened was when Rava was walking home from his drasha, he was surrounded by a whole bunch of Hasidim following him. You know, whenever a gadol walks down the street, he usually has a whole chain of paparazzi. So those humans that were there, Rava's Gaboim said, "Hey, Rava brought a wall with him. The Gaboim of Rava said, "Oh, now we could bring Rava's jugs inside using the fake mechitza, the human mechitza that Rava generated." The Shabbat Achrisi boy alinu. The next week they wanted to do the same thing. Then already Rav said, this week you can't do it anymore. Because now already the people know that you're going to use them. The first week, they didn't know. Now they see you're going to use them. That's already Ladas. That's no longer allowed. Levi Ailule Tivna. I guess by the time they realized it was done already. I'm not sure. But you're saying if in the middle, it should be a problem. I hear. Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, Rashi. No, Rashi. Lo yadu hanoshim al ma kiptum sham. The people didn't know why they were asked to stand there.
They weren't asked to stand there for some other. They were standing there already.
Well, no, Rashi is referring to in Chispa's case when they were trying to save Nehemiah. But here it must be the same thing. It must be the same story. The chiluk of ladas and shlodas starts over there on the people who are participating in the wall. They didn't know if they were being exploited or not. That's right. So Levi Aila Tivna, Levi used to use the human wall.
The second or the third time, like people already know what's going to happen now because it happened the first time. After the third time,
I hear the Gemara feels that people realize.
so then the Chazaka will say, for something.
Right. No, this is merely awareness. Once it happens once, a person becomes aware. A chazaka is not a question of awareness.
It's a question of if it's going to happen again.
Right, but that's not the question here. The question is not if it's going to happen again. The question here is, do I know? Am I aware that it's happening now? So Levi used to use this. He regularly would bring hay from a place where he couldn't carry. When there were people around that he was able to use as a wall. Ziri asfasta. And Ziri used to bring asfasta, which is like asfasta is more like hay. It's the after you cut down the stalk, the stuff that remains in the ground, that's called shachas. And he would bring water in. So people regularly used to use human walls to be able to carry with on Shabbos. There's nothing wrong with that as long as people don't realize what you're doing with it. Zok to Gemara. What if someone left the tchum with permission? Why would someone have permission to go out of the tchum? So Rashi offers several examples. They saw the moon, so they have to go to say Edus in Bez Nagodo that today's Rosh Chodesh. Or they're members of the army. They're members of the army. A Hatzalah guy, he has to go out and save someone's life. Or if there's a river that's flooding and he has to put the sandbags there. Or a midwife who's coming to help a woman give birth. So these are all reasons why someone's allowed to leave the tchum. And then they leave the tchum, but they didn't reach their destination. So people, Edom saw the moon, they're running to Bez Nagodol, and they're traveling on the road, and in the middle, someone meets them and says, "Oh, you're coming to Edom? Sorry, there were Edom there already. We don't need you anymore." Or you're coming to help Rochel give birth? She had her baby 2 hours ago, right? So, Mazel Tov, but now you're stuck in the middle. We no longer need you. So now you're stuck where you are out of the tchum. So we don't confine you to Dalet Amis. Chazal gives you from wherever you are. They give you a proper shvisis mokum. If you were still within the tchum, it's as if you didn't leave, which is going to be a very schwer line because that's obvious. If you're still in the tchum, what's the question? If you're going to save, you're allowed to go back to your place. Again, I'm sorry? Essential services are exempt. Essential services are exempt. I'm sorry? Well, that's all we're discussing, yeah. But you have to quarantine for 14 days. Doesn't say that here. The guy who told him, "Werd gebeten." Yeah, he told him, I think. Very good. You hear David, Shlomo is saying the guy who told him that he's not needed anymore, him they should knas $1 Amos. Werd gebeten, he should have kept his mouth shut. The guy would have got to Yerushalayim. Zok to Gemara. My im hoya b'soichat chum kilo yotze. What does that mean? Of course, he's going to leave yet. Omar Rabba Hachikamer. If wherever he was discovered, it was still within his tchum, it's ki'ilu lo yotza b'toich beis hadami. So normally you say wherever he's found, that there's no shvisa and he has 2,000 ames. If he's still within his original tchum, we don't say that wherever he is, he has 2,000 ames. We say he can go back to his house. More pshita. Why not? He never left his tchum. So from a the tema hoyel v'okar, you might think once he left and he went with Rishus. Rashi is the first wide Rashi. Rashi's even the okar lotus Rishus for abonon tikkun mimokam shenemer loy alpaim l'chorach. He left with Rishus, and the Rabbanan say wherever he will become aware that his services are no longer required, at that moment he becomes implanted where he is, and he has 2,000 amish. You might think hachanami afal kav dekoy betchumoi limded lemehosam. You might think they've already, once he left, he departed his home. Now he's subject to the new set of rules, and his new shvisas mokim is where he discovers that he's no longer needed. Kamash Malon, no, Kamash Malon, that he snaps back, using a term that was done this week, it snaps back to his original tchum. You know what snapback is? Oh, Trump this week snapped back all of the sanctions that were originally on Iran that Obama relaxed because they were entering into the nuclear deal. The deal was, in the original deal, it said that if there's any violation, everything automatically snaps back. They don't have to go and set up new sanctions. It's automatically chal. So Trump invoked the snapback clause this week. Obama had to do that, otherwise the mamish looked bad for him. Right. So that's the shot. So what is the machloikis? What is the machloikis between? Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a line. Kamashal. So Psimi Barchia Amar, Psimi Barchia says differently. Amar Hachik Amar. Im hayutchumin shenosnu lechachamim muvloin b'toich atchum shaloi ki'ilu lo yatsa mitchumai. So let's have a look. He has his tchum, and he has a 2,000 amar radius. Okay. What happens if he left his tchum? He's completely out of the tchum. He's past. He's more than 2,000 amas away from where he started. Right. So he's out of his tchum, completely out. Not like Rabbah, who said he's still within his tchum. He's completely out. But wherever he parked, he has a 2,000 amar radius. Now, if he parked close enough, some of the radius that he got from his new tchum might overlap some of the radius that he had from his original tchum. Unless it's 4,000 amas past his house, there's some overlap. If he's only 3,000 amas past his house, there's an overlap. So what Psimi Barash says, if there's even an overlap, if the new 2,000 amma radius that the Chum gave him has any overlap at all in his original tchum, so then he can go back into his original tchum and he snaps back to his original tchum. Now I'm going to learn pshat that the machlokes between Rabbah and Psimi is Rabbah holds if you're still within your original tchum, you have your original tchum, and the chiddush is you don't lose it because of the new takanah that the Chum made, that you get a new tchum wherever you park, right? And Psimi Barchia holds even more. Even if you're out of your tchum, but the area that Chum gave you, if it overlaps, you could still go back to your original tchum. That's how we're learning. That's the first part of Rashi. Well, the Gemara behandled that, but there's another pshat of Rashi which I'm not going to elaborate on. Who holds? Reb Simi holds that if the two tchumen overlap, you get both tchumen. That's the second pshat of Rashi, but that's not the first pshat of Rashi. And the second pshat of Rashi involves difficulties. Rashi likes the first pshat. So the first pshat is it just means that since your two tchumen overlap, you go back to your original tchum and it snaps back to your original tchum. I'm sorry. Either way, you only have 2,000 amas. The question is what the 2,000 amas are. If it snaps back, you can't go further. But if it doesn't snap back, you can't go home. So wherever you are, it depends on where you want to be. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because your tchum overlaps. You have the tchum, your original tchum, and once you get into the original tchum, now you can go home. So what is the machlokes? Mar Sobar have lost tchum in Milsi. One man holds that there is such a thing as have lost chumen, meaning they do blend together, which would be Rab Simi Bar Chia, and Mar Savar and Rabbi holds Lav Milsi. There's no such thing as combining chumen so that you can get back to your original place. Amalei Abai Rabbi. So Abai asked Rabbi, you who hold that have lost chumen doesn't work. Once you're out, you're out. Va'at like Hizbra, that I've lost chumen milsi. Don't you agree that I've lost chumen milsi? So now the Gemara is going to describe a cave. Imagine a cave that you enter from the top. So there's a hole in the ground and you climb down into the cave. Okay. Now imagine if you have a cave that the floor of the cave is, let's say, 4,000 amas by 4,000 amas. It's a huge interior cave. But as the walls of the cave come up to ground level, the opening gets smaller. So the opening might be only 2,000 amas by 2,000 amas, or less than 4,000 amas, more like, because the walls move in on an incline. So your floor of your cave might be a full 4,000 amas by 4,000 amas, yet the roof of the cave might be smaller than that. Now imagine that there wasn't only one entrance to the cave. Imagine there's two entrances to the cave. If you have a roof that's 3,000 amas, that's a long space. So there might be an entrance on the east side. There might be a hole in the ground on the east side of the cave that lets you get into the east side of the cave. And there might be a hole in the ground that lets you get into the west side of the cave. They both take you into the same cavern, but there's different entrances. So that's the vision that I want to try to imagine. So we have a big cave. It's wider on the bottom than it is on the top, which meaning going across the roof takes you much less time because you're traveling a much shorter distance than going across the floor of the cave. There's an entrance on the east side of the cave, and an entrance on the west side of the cave, and of course the entrance is in the ceiling of the cave, which is the floor of the terrain above. Right? So Zok to Gemara. Abai asked Rabbi, in such a case, va'atla tizbra that have lost tchumen milsahi, you have to agree that two tchumen could merge together. And I'll explain to you using this case. Uma'ilu Shabbos b'ma'ira shebesoicha arba'as halofim. If you ended up on Shabbos settling in a cave that its floor was 4,000 amas, Be'al but its roof was pachas marba'as halofim amma. But the roof was smaller than 4,000 amas because the walls are inclined. So let's think about it. If you're on, let's say you go out, let's say you want to leave the cave on Shabbos, and you go out, you get out to one of the entrances. So how far can you go? Well, how far can you go from that hole when you get onto the ground? You can go 2,000 amas away from the cave, right? From the entrance of the cave, you can go 2,000 amas, right? Or you could walk across the top of the cave to the other entrance and then walk another 2,000 amas, right? If you come out the cave, you come out through the east entrance. So you can either walk 2,000 amas to the east, or you can walk across the roof of the cave to the next hole and then walk another 2,000 amas to the left.
That whole opening area is part of your.
Oh, so the question is, that area on the roof, how can I walk across the roof from one hole to the other hole? The teretz is, since they're within 4,000 amas of each other, the 2,000 amma radius of the two entrances overlap a little bit. And therefore, if I want to go out of the east entrance and walk across the roof of the cave, I'm allowed to. And I'm allowed to go another 2,000 amas to the west on top of the cave. Why? Because the two radiuses, if you went out of the east entrance or the west entrance, if you draw an imaginary circle around each of them, they're going to overlap. Even though at the bottom of the cave, it's bigger. I don't have to come back into the cave and then go back out. I'm allowed to walk right across the roof. That's what Abai was suggesting. So Abai said, if you have such a cave, you Shabbos b'ma'or shebesoicha arba'as halofim. Be'al gaga pachos ma'arba'as halofim. But its roof is less than 4,000 zvachim. Loi nimtza mahalach haskula v'chutala alpai mama. Wouldn't you agree that you don't have to go back down and out again? You can just walk across the roof and head another 2,000 amas the other way. So you see the fact that the two radiuses of 2,000 amas overlap allows you to just go from one to the other. So you agree, at least in this case, that there's a concept of tchumen overlapping. The big hole is a cave. It's like a big house. It's like a big house. I'm sorry? No. No, it has walls. There's a lot of carry inside there. Yeah, he's going to use it.
Why are you hoping for the bottom the case to be 4,000 now to get narrower?
Because the point is, if it didn't get narrower, everybody agrees. If it didn't get narrower on top, everybody would agree, got to go down and up again. So the point is, it's really two separate entrances that really are not connected to each other. But the fact that they're close enough allows you to go from one radius to the next.
They were close enough, even on the bottom too.
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Why do you need to begin? I'm not sure. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why. I think because Rashi points out that if it was big on top and big on bottom, everybody agrees you got to go down and up again. But I'm sorry? Yeah, I want to go back there. No, I know it for Rashi. Of course I know it. Yeah, I actually want to get to the Mishnah on Amud Aleph. Oh no, I want to. There's no Mishnah, but so let me just finish this last line. We have a couple of minutes left. So let's just. So Rabbah answered back. Omer lei, come on, it's not a kasha. V'lo loch. Don't you make a distinction between heichad the Shabbos ba'aver mechitzas mebajoyim, leichad the Shabbos ba'aver mechitzas mebajoyim. In the case of the cave, the reason why I allow the overlap on top is because I'm in the cave and I have access to both entrances, and I was there before Shabbos. Mashenkin over here, in this case, in the case of our Mishnah, where you were by your house, and now you want to set yourself up a new location there you don't say overlap. When you were Shabbos in a place where Lamaisi you have access to both from the beginning, so before Shabbos, you already set up to become Shvitza in both radiuses. It's all there for you. Here, you want to say a brand new Makam Shvitza shows up on Shabbos, and that should allow them both to blend. That I don't allow. So that's what Rabbi answered. Are you telling me, Rabbi, that since you were not Shabbos in the Mechitzim and Bajoim, you don't get to overlap? But not Rabbi Eliezer Aimer. Shtayim, this is the same Rabbi Eliezer we had before. If you're within 2 amis of the edge, Yechanis, you can come back in. Gimel, if you're 3 amis from the edge of your tchum, Lo Yechanis, you cannot come back in. My love, let's suggest that Rabbi Eliezer Tamehu, that Rabbi Eliezer is sticking with his shita. The Omar, who be'emtzon, he has a radius of 2 amis. The arba amis the Yahavale Rabbanon, and the 4 amis that the Rabbanon give him is command the mivlin dummy. It's as if it's part of the same tchum. So therefore, the ka'ama yechanes. So Rabbi Eliezer holds, even though I'm past 2,000 amis, I'm out of my tchum, but my new dalad al dalad overlaps my area of the tchum. Alma have lost tchum and milsi. So you see from Rabbi Eliezer, that even though you're out of your tchum, but you're within 2 amis, and there's a little overlap, you see from him that you do have this concept of avlah. Alma avlah tchum and milsi. Lamar, you're asking me a kash from Rabbi Eliezer? Maybe I hold it to Rabbanon. So you can ask me a kash from Rabbi Eliezer, maybe I hold it to Rabbanon. So to Gemara, I will ask you a kash from Rabbi Eliezer. The Shemiya Leminei Demar, I heard from you who said that Atan like Pligi Rabbanon like Rabbi Eliezer El Dvar Shus. Where did Rabbi Eliezer argue under? Where did Rabbanon argue under Rabbi Eliezer and hold? I don't have the 2 amis. That's only for Dvar Shus. I will Dvar Mitzvah Moedulei, and here we're discussing the Dvar Mitzvah. Okay, let's stop here. Yeah. And the Gemara is soon going to discuss. That for essential services, like for a war, you have even more than this.